crop agriculture, we have fisheries, we have blue economy, we have the camel and other livestock, and only rural household. It does not make a lot of sense. On the other hand, I think on the land index, I think this is what brought a lot of debate in the counties. Up to today, I don't understand the way finally it has been done. And this is because 1 shilling, 1 kilometer, 1 vote, 1 shilling, 1 person, 1 vote. The story has been going on and going on and going on. Ultimately, we are trying to depend on money that we don't have, and even we don't know whether we are going to get it. We are saying that after this 316,000, billion, some money will come later. We don't know whether our economy is going to be very bad, or it may become very good. That is not 70 billion we are expecting. We might expect another 300 billion. BBI might come, and we might get 35% and got some money. So this is ambiguous, to be basing our formulas on things that we don't have in our hands is ambiguous. Mr. Speaker, sir, when we talk of people having looked at this formula for 1.5 years before it came here, I don't understand why we also cannot be given at least 2 weeks to debate on it. Although, unfortunately, I hear that because we will not be able to raise the 2/3, just like the gender issue, ultimately we shall pass it. But I think we have to keep records that although, because we are not able to raise that threshold, we must have our inputs seriously documented. This house is a house of records, so that in future, if you refer back to the Hansard, you know where the issues are, we know where that is going to be looked at. Look at a parameter like water, which is not there. 80% of this country is arid and semi-arid land. And the most limiting factor in terms of livelihood, in terms of development of everything, is water. What maybe the Asal people could have seriously requested for is to give a very high percentage to the water. Leave alone giving a high percentage. It is not even there at all. It is not there in the formula. So I think the whole thing is very unfortunate. It has taken 1.5 years to reach this stage. The counties are starving, they need money. Unfortunately, we cannot take a lot more time again to continue to starve them, but we need to look at these formulas in future very critically. We need to look at what is good for this country. It's not what is good for a few people who are there, who wants to become governors in the coming 2022, so that they can have a lot of money around them. That is not important. What is important is what is good for our people. If there is no water and Mandera West.
Honorable Manzo.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to comment on this very important matter. Mr. Speaker, first I want to thank and congratulate the chair of the Committee of Budget for having looked at this through very quickly and brought it to us. I also want to finally thank Senate for having come up with something which we can peruse and to make a way forward. And more important, the executive for having come in and assisted the country when things were beginning to stall. Mr. Speaker, devolution is in the Constitution and is very, very important for this country. And we are looking for ways, including in BBI, how to make devolution better in this country, although it has been having a lot of challenges in the past. For the counties to take 3 months now without funds, it means eventually people will be paid salaries for not having worked as such, and it means also delay of development and a very crucial matters, including agriculture, because we are going to the rainy season, having been delayed out of the impasse which was there. So we must improve as Parliament so that in future there are no delays of such nature and there is no wastage of time and finances. When you look at the formula and what is important for the country, agriculture is very, very key in this country. We have we have sugarcane growing, which is happening in the counties, which is happening in Western and the coast. We have fishy, the blue economy, which is lost, whether it is happening in the counties or at the national level. And we need to see really an effort in terms of investment. When you look at the 70% recurrent and 30% development, it should be the other way around. It means we are employing a lot of people who must be put into good use. And it means we are doing very little development in the counties when you look at the 30%. And that explains the reason why even a simple fund like CDF, which is such a small percentage, seems to be doing better at the devolution level than the devolution itself at the counties. And I think this is something to be looked at again in the future to make sure that the development is increased as time moves on and it is specific and clear. Because the devolved units are specific: health, but agriculture and the presence of water, because the two of them go together, is what can really cause development at the grassroots. If it is the pastoralists and they have water and they have grass, the animals will do much better if we have a better animal husbandry and even how to process the products and get sold locally or internationally. If you look at the production, the producing areas, the food basket of the country, and the coming up of irrigation, if such things are not being debated at the Senate or the county assemblies or by ourselves through allocation of funds to specific projects, then it becomes very absurd, because it means we will never then produce, this being an agricultural country, and have proper irrigation and be able even to sell the excess, enough to have to raise enough for ourselves and also to sell to other countries for profit and the foreign exchange. And therefore, when you look at the whole budget allocation and the role of CRA, which has been very good, we really need to amalgamate it and to make sure that it is properly synchronized, and so that some development can be felt. We have talked about much of devolution, but to be very honest, although it's a very good concept, Kenyans are not happy what is happening in the counties. A lot of revenue, raising revenue is a very important matter nationally and in the counties. And unfortunately, the management of the revenues raised in the counties up to now is very unclear, Mr. Speaker. And there must be a way of making sure that all the money raised in the counties is accounted for. Most of it is not lost to the revenue collectors themselves and to the county governments, but there must be a kitty that has been allocated 2%, which we are able to tap at some point. And during difficult times like the 3 months have been where they were almost closing hospitals, they should have enough monies to run those facilities at the grassroots, Mr. Speaker. I really thank you for this opportunity. I beg to support.
Honorable Geshimo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute. Mr. Speaker, I start by thanking the Committee of Budget for delivering to this House within the shortest time possible. Mr. Speaker, I start by saying that as a country, as the Houses of Parliament, we should also be giving the constitutional commissions who have been mandated with the responsibilities of certain functions like the Commission for Revenue Allocation, their respect in delivering their mandate. This is a commission which has experts who are drawn from all spheres in terms of purposes of considering matters of revenue allocation. So Senate should not have assumed that they know better than the Commission for Revenue Allocation. Mr. Speaker, one of my worries that I have about this kind of formula is for the 4-5 years that we are passing this formula to operate, we will still be using the 2009. Even if this country is able to stabilize economically and raise 370 billion and above for allocation to the counties, we will still be using the 2009 population results, which were controversial. And in that case, some counties which are very heavily and highly populated will miss out on the rightful share of out of this formula. Mr. Speaker, another issue that I want to raise is whether by passing this formula, I think that is a critical question that also came up with the Honorable Pukose, is that are we obligating ourselves as a house that we must pass a budget worth 370 plus in the next financial year? And I think I have a different opinion, because a budget cannot be made in anticipation. It can only be meant as at when that time arises. Mr. Speaker, then it means that this formula might not be workable going forward, apart from this year, whereby nothing is being added or subtracted from the previous budget of 2019-2020, Mr. Speaker. Another issue is that the inability of the Senate to pass this formula in a record 10 times shows that this is a house which has very little to do. Because were it for this house, we would not have that luxury of time to meet every other week to discuss one single issue. So it means that the Senate ought to probably in future consider concentrating more on county matters, and also reducing their work in committees, especially oversighting national government institutions, whereby we are also likely to be having different reports from committees of parliament and the Senate. Mr. Speaker, for the interest of this country and for the way forward, irrespective of the many questions that are rising out of this process, Mr. Speaker, I support the motion for this country to go forward. And I thank again the Committee on Budget for the good work and fast enough. Thank you.
Let us hear from the Chair of Finance, Honorable Wanga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank the Budget Committee, Chairman, for moving this very important motion, and my leader, who's very eloquently seconded this motion in a way that members really got to understand what is really behind the formula. Mr. Speaker, I must say that I'm very pleased that some of these parameters have been introduced, such as health, in the revenue sharing formula, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the health indicator there, the health facility gaps is 20%, primary healthcare visits to level 2 and 3 facilities, 60%, and visits to level 4 and 5 hospitals, another 20%. So visits to facilities is coming to 80%, while the facilities gap remains at 20%. Mr. Speaker, first of all, starting with level 4 and 5, only 11 counties in this country have level 5 facilities. So already, if you do not have a level 5 facility, there is already a disadvantage there, because you will be having nothing to visit. Level 2 and 3 facilities, Mr. Speaker, there has been a laxity even within our own counties, where people do not want to go to the dispensary or to the health center. Everybody runs to go to the main hospital, referral hospital within that county, because when you go to level 2 and 3 facilities, there is no medication within those facilities, and people go to higher facilities. So, Mr. Speaker, when the minority leader said that the debate should be whether the facilities gap is adequate, I would propose that this facilities gap is moved to take a higher portion. Not just 20%, it should take up to 30 or 40%, so that we take care of those who do not have facilities in the first place, so that we are not giving money for facilities visits when the facilities sometimes are not there or are not equipped. Then we come to the issue of data, Mr. Speaker. If you look at, and I think Honorable Makali Mulu raised the issue of data, the data that we intend to use for this purpose, because when you're looking there, the formula is talking about number of primary healthcare visits over the total number of primary healthcare visits in the country. This number of primary healthcare visits, Mr. Speaker, how sure are we that we are using the correct data that can actually be verified properly, Mr. Speaker, and people are not just adding things on top of what they have just so that they can get more money, Mr. Speaker. And I think the issue of data, not just in primary healthcare visits, but the issue of data in the other aspects as well, should be well taken care of and well looked at, Mr. Speaker. And when you come to the issue of agriculture, Mr. Speaker, it has already been spoken to. The formula is talking about rural households in a county divided by the total number of rural households in the whole country. How is that now taking care of agriculture? Because when you go to Homa Bay, for example, as has been said before, the mainstay there is fishing. How are we taking care of that in this formula? When you talk about people who are growing miraa in Meru, or people who are keeping livestock in Northeastern, how is that taken care of in this formula? And why have the senators not explained to us how has agriculture as a factor carrying up to 18, agriculture carrying up to 10%, Mr. Speaker, in this formula, how are we taken care of as people within the blue economy areas, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, then the issue of water. When you're thinking about a formula, like this, water cannot be a factor that misses. Water must be a primary factor, and we want to look at how we can review so that accessibility to water by our people is included in a formula such as this. Because if you have no water, there is no agriculture. If you have no water, you cannot operate. If you have no water, there is no health. Mr. Speaker, without water, there is no life. Mr. Speaker, removing fiscal discipline and removing the issue of revenue, Mr. Speaker, that is the biggest mistake that the Senate made. The biggest. Because corruption is what is going to kill devolution in this country. And if we remove the elements that are dealing with the issues of corruption, then we are headed to a place where we will never be able to salvage devolution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, it's good you concluded, but there was some voice that came from you that is not understandable. But as the chair of finance, that's okay. Honorable Bui Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. First, I wish to thank God for touching the hearts of these senators so that the suckers that they had treated this country to for a very long time has finally come to an end. In fact, the Bible talks about the story of Saul, who went and got a flash of lightning and then suddenly became Paul. And I think that's what happened to them. Mr. Speaker, there are some very basic areas of disagreement that the Senate has had on when they were discussing this formula. In fact, apparently, as my leader has ably put it, they really didn't look at the criteria properly. They were interested in personalization of these issues. And that's why one of the things they were talking about continuously was that some counties are gaining and others are losing. And at the end of it all, the proposal that we've got here is that a situation where no county loses. But if the law allows that every 5 years, a formula must be created that will be able to move with the changing times, then we cannot be personalizing and talking about my county is gaining, my county is losing, because that's not really the basis under the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, there was, of course, the issues of marginalized communities, and that has always been an issue. I think the Constitution 2010 tried to address that matter on the issue of equalization fund, which unfortunately, as we are aware, has not been able to be actualized. Mr. Speaker, I will not go and talk about the formula, because my leader has ably unpacked it and explained to us critically what is contained there. But allow me to also talk about some of the missing services, because members have talked about water and electricity, and there's one aspect of a devolved function of education, which is education in lower levels of ECD and also polytechnics. Mr. Speaker, it is important because these are some of the services that needed to also have been addressed. How come this whole total formula does not consider those aspects which are really devolved to the counties? So when they are sharing monies, why would they forget the education of those young children? Why would they forget the education of those children that are finished from 4 and are going to polytechnics? Because they are getting skills for the future. So I think it's important that these things be looked at very seriously. On the matter of fiscal discipline, which Senate has unfortunately removed, Article 203, subsection E, talks about, because it talks about the criteria used in determining equitable share. It says that physical capacity and efficiency of county governments should be one of the criteria that is used. The fiscal capacity and efficiency of county governments. Mr. Speaker, if we remove the fiscal discipline element, then we are basically going against the Constitution, because it is one of those parameters that must be considered when this allocation of revenue bill is being addressed. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about the amount of money, the 370 billion, which is in our order paper, which we have addressed. Mr. Speaker, we have passed a division of revenue bill in this House, which talks about 316.5 billion. I don't know where the 370 billion is coming from. Is it an advance that next year, when we pass the division of revenue bill, we are going to give 370 billion? Because I believe that this House will have to debate and agree. And it will also depend very much on the amount of money that will be available for sharing. So I think the fact that we are discussing monies which we don't have is totally unfortunate. You know, we have this situation of COVID-19. You don't know exactly what it will do to this nation by that time. So it's very important. Mr. Speaker, finally, I want to talk about the problems that we are having in understanding of our Constitution. Article 95 has given us the responsibility of determining the allocation of revenue between the two levels of government. And then Article 96.3 gives the Senate the responsibility of determining the allocation of national revenue among counties, as provided under Article 217. Mr. Speaker, that is why this House, as we are debating this motion, you will find that we are not going to try to make amendments, because we believe that that is a responsibility given to Senate. Why is it every year that when we pass the division of revenue bill, Senate must force a change so that we end up doing a mediation? I think it's important that the two houses respect each other. We have seen the mistakes they've made, but we are respecting them and we'll pass it the way it is. In future, let them also respect this House.
Let's have Honorable Bashir, member for Mandela North. I know whether you is a ranking member, but you get a chance. Honorable Bashir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. First and foremost, I want to support this motion and congratulate the Committee for Budget and Appropriations. I know the time was very short, but they burned the midnight oil to come up with this, this report. Honorable Speaker, this matter has been with the Senate for quite some time, since last year. However, I also want to congratulate them ultimately for agreeing to come up with a formula that actually puts everybody as a win, or a winner for that matter. It's a win-win situation, and I congratulate the Senate, despite the drama that has unfolded before they ultimately agreed on this matter. Honorable Speaker, I know several parameters have been placed by CRA, a number of them weighty. One parameter that I really wanted to discuss, and amongst the others, is the one of agriculture. Agriculture, in my estimation, should include all other, and not necessarily only crop, because in the place where I come from, we have what we call pastoralism, or camel and cattle for that matter. And that should also be part of this parameter under agriculture. The parameter that is not here, unfortunately, is the issue of water. 80% of our country is arid and semi-arid land, 80%. And water is of essence. Unfortunately, there's no parameter of water that has been addressed by CRA in this formula. It's unfortunate. So sometimes when we look at, these are some of the basic necessities that our people really need. In Northeastern, for example, people are talking about counties are equal in terms of they should get money the same, something like that. But look at, since independence, Northeastern has been neglected successfully by successive regimes. So you cannot compare a county like Nairobi, a county like Kiambu, to counties in Garissa, Wajir, or Mandera. It's not their fault. So, with the devolution, it is just 7 years. I know we are talking about people saying devolution has just come, there's a lot of corruption. Yes, we agree. It has its own shortcomings. But compare 7 years of devolution and 50 years of national government neglect. Devolution of 7 years cannot cure 50 years of neglect. It can't. 7 years, you're talking about 7 years. It cannot. So, I'm fully aware of those things. There are counties that have been supported by successive governments since independence. From 1963, they have been on upward trend. Those ones in the ASAL, and especially Northeastern, have been on downward trend. We're talking about population. Yes, population is a key factor, and in fact, it's given more weight, quite in order. No problem with it. But what happens? Are we going to give out this money of allocating to the counties to individuals? Or you're using this money for development or services? Now, you're talking about a county that has been developed since independence. What other aspects of development do they need? Even there's no space to do a road. And yet you are saying, give more money to the same counties and deny others that have been denied since independence. I think the point is that this House is also to blame for the stalemate. Remember, this House determines the allocation between the national government and the county governments. Why did we not, in the first place, also allocate more resources to the counties, and yet we keep on blaming now the Senate and say they are unable to do it? You know, the counties don't operate in isolation. Our constituencies, the people we represent reside in those counties. There's no county called national that we purport to say we are going to represent them in this House. The people we represent are in the counties. Our constituencies are in the counties. If more resources are taken to the counties, fair enough, we will have accountability. We will tell also the county governments to ensure that these resources are prudently used and equitably shared amongst the sub-counties, amongst the constituencies in areas where the counties are. So my plea to the county governments and the governors in particular is that
Honorable Martin Owino.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this, and also I want to thank the Budget Committee for taking up this very fast. As Mr. Speaker, when the Senate was dilly-dallying with this thing, the problem came on to MPs because the counties are not functioning. So we had to use the meager CDF to help everywhere. And we want them to know that is not right when we talk about public money. Now, Mr. Speaker, the primary fiduciary responsibility of Senate is to look after the money, how it is generated, and how it is used. Now, if they remove the tool to do that, which is called fiscal prudence and effort. Then you ask yourself, what are they going to use to motivate or punish when they go the way they are going? Point number 2, Mr. Speaker, the disease burden is not measured by frequent visits in primary health facilities. Because right now we are promoting that even if you want to check your blood pressure or sugar, you should visit. And if you have those closer to you, you will have more visits. So you'll have some counties having several visits, not because people are sick per se, but because they want to stay healthy. So that is a wrong indicator. In fact, if we were to debate this, what would have been in line is disease mortality and disease morbidity, and the burden on the household's finances in responding to diseases. So I think this, at one point or the other, Mr. Speaker, we have to review how these indicators are being used. Otherwise, it's not going to help us. The third point I want to make, Mr. Speaker, is that in my constituency in Dewa, we have the largest center which have not been upgraded to an urban center, but the population fits. So I'm sure we are going to lose out this 5% which is put here. That means it's not only urban centers that have the poor people. Poor people are in rural areas. We have missed in Kazi Mutaani, and we are going to miss in this. So this is not a very good indicator. And I appeal that at one point, we should discuss this as a House. Let the Senate do their core mandate. But division of sharing revenues or originality of money bills should absolutely be left to this House. Then we will have solved this chaos. With that, I support and I congratulate the budget and my minority leader for debunking this very smartly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Imo.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity to contribute to this very, very important motion, Mr. Speaker. And I don't want to repeat a lot of issues have been raised by the other members. But one thing which I must state, Mr. Speaker, is that this formula actually is very political and it is not realistic. However, most members here have heard them talk. They are supporting because they need to unlock the resources to counties. But the good thing is that no law is on casting stone, Mr. Speaker. It can be revisited because we have to say this to the Senate. If you look at this formula very well, the promise of indication that you are saying that from this year to this year, the allocation should be 370 is purely unconstitutional, Mr. Speaker, because the only house which originates the division of revenue which will allocate that 370 is this house. And when you allocate using CARA, it is not going to work. It doesn't, you can't work backwards. You have to use the Constitution and follow the Constitution to the letter. So what I am saying here, Mr. Speaker, is that by quoting in the formula that from 370, it is actually taking the powers of this House from the back door. The Senate is assuming that they can actually determine, you know, by following what the executive promises. Those are promissory notes which should not come to legislation. You just come up with a formula which is clear. Mr. Speaker, the amount between 316 billion and 370, in between, which formula are we going to use? There is a gap. And therefore, what this House can do in its own wisdom is to pass this legislation, but with a rider that the Senate must revisit, because the allocation for 2019 and 2020 will be used in 2020, 2021. That means it is not, this formula will not affect the current allocation. All counties will more or less get the same allocation which they got last year, and therefore it will not be affected by this formula. And given that we have time between now and next year, July, when it is starting, the Senate must revisit this formula and bring it to this House again so that we comply with the Constitution. Otherwise, it is unconstitutional if we pass the way it is. Finally, Mr. Speaker, on this formula, if this House agrees with this, do not be again convinced that you can go back next year during division of revenue bill, then say we have no money, therefore we are allocating 330 billion. You must allocate what you have actually passed. So you cannot pass this with a 370 quoted in the bill without having a conversation. Let us not rush because of time, and let us not fear telling the people the truth. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the Senate has abrogated its responsibilities in one thing. The problem is not allocation of money to the counties. The bigger problem in the village where I come from, in the village called Chepcholiet, in the village called Mugumuine, in the village called Chebewar, the people are yearning for services. They have not been given water. People have been making roads using manual jembes, Mr. Speaker. And here we are talking about allocating and clapping that we have taken to the county. We should have, the Senate should have come up with a protection that any additional resources going to counties must be reinvested for certain kind of projects which must be development. Otherwise, the counties are going to misuse this money, and the current way where the county assemblies are being swallowed by the executive. They cannot talk on behalf of the people. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Honorable John Bunyasi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to contribute to this very fascinating discussion that we are lucky in this time, that we are alive at this time to discuss this matter. I saw this issue, it came up as a big opportunity to discuss important public policy questions in the relationship between county governments and national government as our devolution matures. I start from where the President left off first and foremost, by thanking him in offering the 53.5 billion that will bring this to 370. I'm fully aware of the physical implications of this, but let us take him at his word. A year ago or two, he said he had no extra shilling to add it to the package that was going to the counties. Now he has agreed to add 53.5. That we must thank him for. Where will that money come from? The money is simply going to come from that portion of resources that were going to the national government. And in the next presentation, we expect to see this figure actually embedded in the division of revenue as perhaps being a switch from the part that was national. After all, we have some money. Look at what has happened during this COVID financing. Suddenly we have 40-something billion stolen, or we have this amount of money missing. There is money in the system, and the President is committing to switch that money from national government to the county government side. I thank him. We hold him at his word, and I don't think that the President will go back on this word. Two, let us remember that last year we have been told that in the allocation to the counties, a total of 30 billion was not released from the Treasury. 30 billion shillings was not released last year. So the counties have had to do with that shortfall. That shortfall also ought to be corrected. There are many corrections that need to be made. Next, Mr. Speaker, sir, the formula, we must be faithful to data, especially official data that comes from the Bureau of Statistics or from any other centers, Huduma Center, Huduma numbers rather, for which they spend so much money, and the census numbers that have just come out, for example. And that in applying, we are told, in applying that formula just of updating population, the base, which is now the one from which we are starting, would have changed. And that must be done. If we don't do that, we are beginning to lie to ourselves, lie to the people, and if you lie there, why not lie anywhere else? We shall have no confidence in these numbers. The data must be applied faithfully, but there are policy options you can use. If you apply the data, and as we were told, that if they had used the correct population numbers of 2019, 12 counties would lose, then we ask ourselves, how can you cushion them as a special mechanism but you can't hide it. You can't gloss over it. And I think that's going to be something that will come and haunt us one of these days. Mr. Speaker, we have the Equalization Fund. I think this debate took longer than it needed to take because the government hasn't come out honestly on the issue of the disbursement of the Equalization Fund. Plus, it's a mechanism that we can use to calibrate the support to counties where there are perceived shortfalls. If, for example, using population data, we saw that there was going to be a big fall, and the fall has arisen because there was a big gain that was not a justifiable gain, so it is a compensation. We would have looked for ways in which you can cushion their adjustment to normality, their adjustment to data that's real data. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of there are a number of factors in the formula that we have been told, and I also want to thank both the Majority Leader and Honorable Badi for attempting to clarify and clarify and tell us what's behind these numbers. I think that going forward, we need to get a robust debate, not on the actual outcomes, first of all, but on how these inputs are being, which numbers are being put in. Because what you put in, like they say, garbage in, garbage out, what you put in is what you might get outside. But I'm hoping that the next generation formula, or as this goes forward, let's ask ourselves, how do we normalize the differences in mortality rates, say child mortality? How can we get this region to rise up to the national averages and not just deal with input factors, let us deal with impacts as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Duare.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, the budget making process is time-bound. And if you read this report, the Commission for Revenue Allocation submitted its recommendation to the Senate on the 30th of April 2019. So the Senate took too long. But Mr. Speaker, the Senate has no problem. Those of us who come from the pastoral areas, people, when they come to resources, even as little as pasture, people fight. Even the fish in Migingo Island, that's why we are fighting Uganda. So when a matter is about resources, the Senate has not committed any crime, anything on resources. People in my constituency, they fight either over land, over water, over pasture. So I think that we can forgive the Senate. Mr. Speaker, the other matter which is in this report, and I want the chair of budget, to listen to me. The amount that has been increased, that made it 370, that amount constitutionally is illegal. If you read Article 135 of the Constitution, it is very explicit. It says if the president makes a decision, he must put it in writing with his seal. Unless the chair will give us a letter from the president and a seal, that figure is a political figure. So we must just be dealing with the one that we passed here of 316, I think, 0.5 in the Division of Revenue Act. So, Chair, make sure in your recommendation you put that as illegal. Number two, Mr. Speaker, experience for a number of years has indicated that it's important for the Senate, so to deal with the matter, the bill before the Senate, the Public Finance Management Amendment Act. If they deal with that bill and they bring it back to the House, and that amendment was giving the Senate and solving this problem, that in case of a stalemate, the counties can access 50% of their resources. So the Senate, as they were dealing with the formula, they should have gone ahead and complete that bill, and the President assents to it, that going forward, the counties will not be in a lockdown. Mr. Speaker, as we consider the third basis of allocating money among counties, we must be and we must take cognizance of the financial misappropriation that is taking place in the counties. Kenyans must have a conversation. Yes, we will fight for more resources, but we must fight how are we using the money that we already have. Speaker, if you have 10 shillings and you are misappropriating it, why should I give you another 10 shillings? If I open for you a kiosk and down the line you have closed the kiosk. So we must do, and I want to give figures, Mr. Speaker, if you allow me. Reports from the Controller of Budget, Mr. Speaker, indicate various challenges. Among them, counties are spending huge sums of money on personal emolument. It is very clear, and the figure is with the Controller of Budget. I read the report. There is a lot of underperformance in own source of revenue collection. Who said that counties should only depend from the money from the division of revenue? They must collect money. I mean, they have got functions. Mr. Speaker, you look at between 2019 2020, only 48.5% of the annual target was received from own source revenue. Speaker, there's low spending on development budget. Low spending across all counties. In fact, the Controller of Budget is saying they have only spent 25% of the annual budget of 2019-2020 on development. Devolution, Honorable Kioni is sitting here in Sofia, was not meant for salaries. Devolution was not meant for buying cars. Devolution was meant to improve the health sector. Devolution was meant to improve on the roads. Devolution was meant, Speaker, I want you to admit just 2 minutes, because this is a serious matter. Because anyway, members should know that there's nothing we can do. This is a talk show. We can't amend it. For us to do anything, we have.
Well, Majority, you know, there are quite a number of members today who want to speak to this. Have a minute to conclude that thought so that we give.
If you allow me, it's important. Speaker, I want to remind this House, even as we speak, the Deputy Governor of West Pokot has been drawing salary while working abroad. The Senate should focus on such issues. But Mr. Speaker, the elephant in the room is two things. If you allow me 1 minute. One, Kenya is defined by two things, land and population. There are those people who tell us that they want to define Kenya by population. If there is no land, how do you live? So there's no way you can link between land and population. In fact, the definition of a country is land and population. So I think we must balance the two. But Mr. Speaker, the elephant in the room is, and this is to the Budget Committee, this House needs to have a partial distribution of the billions of money remaining at the national government. Why can't we ask ourselves that question? And going forward, because everybody participate in paying of the national debt, whether you are in Garissa or you are in Kiambu. So, Mr. Speaker, I think the Budget Committee in future should tell us the allocation of projects under development expenditure per county from the national government remaining kitty. We can't just be discussing what goes on to the counties. Why can't we discuss what remains here? So we must be told how has it been distributed. And Mr. Speaker, I have a table here from the Budget Committee of the previous chair. You will be shocked when Nairobi gets this amount, Samburu gets one. Like for example, roads. Nairobi got 186 road projects. Samburu County got 2 projects. I don't know whether, in fact, Taita is here. Taita got 12. Taita got 12. So, so Mr. Speaker, I think as we go this way, let us be very honest. The way we have a formula for the 316 going to the counties, let us have a formula for what remains with the national government.
Well, let's go to that far end. Let's have Honorable Denita.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity again, Mr. Speaker, to have a women's voice, Mr. Speaker, on this crucial matter. That is the third basis allocation to counties, Mr. Speaker. I think I'm the second honorable lady to speak on this crucial matter, Mr. Speaker, and it's very, very important. Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me again to thank the Committee of Budget and Appropriations, Mr. Speaker, And Mr. Speaker, the speed by which the committee has brought the report to me again makes me wonder why it took the Senate almost 1.5 years, Mr. Speaker, to bring such a report to this House. And Mr. Speaker, the Senate, as you are aware, has sat or has held almost 12 sessions, Mr. Speaker, to discuss this matter, Mr. Speaker. And it is not fair that we have really kept our counties, Mr. Speaker, waiting. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Duale has basically taken almost everything that I wanted to speak. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the fact that the Senate took almost 11 sittings and 11 sessions to discuss this matter, Mr. Speaker, should be a clear indication, Mr. Speaker, that we as a House, National Assembly, must actually take back the role of Article 216, Mr. Speaker, that basically gives the power to the Senate. Mr. Speaker, you can see that we have quickly, through the committee, Mr. Speaker, because in the last Parliament, I sat in the Budget and Appropriations Committee, and Mr. Speaker, that is the speed with which we went through. Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to say that I love the parameters that have been put in place that include the parameter that is health. Mr. Speaker, the parameter of health and agriculture and poverty. And especially, Mr. Speaker, looking at the fact that women in this country, Mr. Speaker, suffer disproportionately when it comes to issues of health, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I speak here because, Mr. Speaker, you saw last week what happened in Pumwani. Mr. Speaker, sir, health has received 17% of the national budget, which is a good number. But, Mr. Speaker, how does the health budget translate into reality? In Pumwani last week, Mr. Speaker, you saw a woman who went to deliver. And that woman, Mr. Speaker, sadly enough, she had to deliver at the gate of the hospital, Mr. Speaker. It is not fair in this time and era to have a woman who goes to deliver, Mr. Speaker, the way that woman delivered at Pumwani. It is a shame. And we are talking about 17% of the budget that goes into health. Mr. Speaker, sir, this 17% must translate into maternal health. Maternal health in this country, Mr. Speaker, is a big challenge. What is maternal health, Mr. Speaker, when a woman cannot deliver in a delivery room? Mr. Speaker, we are talking and we are not implementing. Mr. Speaker, I am a strong believer in this country that if a woman carries a pregnancy to birth, Mr. Speaker, 9 months, there must be a baby. And there must be a healthy baby in this country that, Mr. Speaker, we are talking about allocating money to health and maternal health. Poverty, Mr. Speaker, has taken a feminine face in this country. We are in situations, Mr. Speaker, where you see women are majority of the poor. Persons with disabilities in this country are majority of the poor. Mr. Speaker, we have a tendency in this country where we are putting our budgets, Mr. Speaker, we clump our budgets together. Mr. Speaker, we cannot say persons with disabilities have a budget when all their budgets fall under one ministry, the Ministry of Labor. Everything under disability, Ministry of Labor. Mr. Speaker, we must be deliberate to ensure that even within these various ministries, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have allocations that are clear around persons with disabilities, around women, and around youth. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have the Equalization Fund in this country. And Mr. Speaker, sir, Equalization Fund that is actually put together by CRA, Mr. Speaker, is a very important fund. And Mr. Speaker, I want to propose this. Mr. Speaker, because you have seen in this country, a lot of Equalization Fund, Mr. Speaker, targets the ASAs, the arid and semi-arid areas. Mr. Speaker, we need to relook at the Equalization Fund. I come from the county of Migori. I come from the constituency that is Kuria East. Kuria East is equally marginalized, Mr. Speaker. We cannot say that counties are the basis for allocating Equalization Fund. Migori County, Mr. Speaker, as you speak, as you know, has issues now as we speak. Mr. Speaker, sir, as Honorable Aden Duale says, we must be very, very categorical, Mr. Speaker, and we must look at the level of plunder in our counties, Mr. Speaker. It is not just receiving money, Mr. Speaker. A lot of plunder and misuse of funds is going on in the counties. Mr. Speaker, Migori County now, and like any other counties, now receive about 1 billion. Mr. Speaker, this formula is a good formula. And we will, Mr. Speaker, support this formula because it is going to address the issues that we are talking about, Mr. Speaker. And we must, as women, build our voices in terms of revenue discussions, Mr. Speaker, in this country. And we must be completely supported in this.
What's your point of order? Okay, very well. What? Give her the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this chance. Although my sister has finished, but I'm really disappointed when people talk about equalization funds. People have not known the reality on them. This equalization fund has been released once.
Very well. If she has finished, honorable member, if she has finished.
But I was asking you, Mr. Speaker, to give me. I want to put straight into records, Mr. Speaker.
You get a chance. Honorable Mwashako from Coast.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa nafasi hii. Mheshimiwa Spika, sitasema mambo mengi leo kwa sababu mengi yamesemwa, lakini ni mambo machache kama matatu hivi ningetaka sana kusema ili kwanza na support ama naunga mkono mjadala huu kwamba hii sheria ya 3 ambayo imepitishwa na bunge la Senate tuiunge mkono kama bunge la kitaifa. Mheshimiwa Spika, mambo haya yaliyojadiliwa ndani ya Senate kwa muda mrefu yalitatiza sana shughuli nyingi katika counties nyingi hapa Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, nilitamani sana nguvu ile wenzetu wa Senate.
What is it, Honorable Jedi? What is out of order?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I arise on standing order number 85. I've been here from commencement of this debate, and most of the speakers we are concurring. I would urge you to call upon the mover to reply. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order members.
Speaker, standing order number 95.
Order members.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, that's fine, Honorable Jedi. I have heard you.
Standing order number 85.
Very well, Honorable Jedi, I have heard you. Honorable members, when a member rises on that point of order, it is the Speaker to determine the mood of the House. So that then, if the House resolves that the mover be called to reply, so be it. If the House resolves otherwise, so honorable members, I'll put the question that the mover now be called to reply. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? Nay. Order members, I'll carry that again. Order members, I'll carry that again. That the mover now be called to reply. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? Nay. Clearly the nays have it. Honorable Mwashako, please proceed.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika. Vile nilivyotangulia kusema, ningetamani sana nione ile nguvu wenzetu wa Senate walitumia kwa kujadili bilioni 316 na vile zitagawanyiwa katika kaunti zetu. Wangetumia nguvu hizo, Mheshimiwa Spika, kupigana na ufisadi ambao unaendelea katika magatuzi yetu. Mheshimiwa Spika, walitumia nguvu nyingi sana, lakini wakati mwingi na wenzangu wengi wameongea kwamba kuna upujaji wa pesa sana katika magatuzi, lakini wenzetu wa Seneti hawajatumia nguvu ile kuangalia kwamba ama kutia maanani kwamba pesa inayoenda kwa counties ama magatuzi imetumika vyema. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa haraka tu nataka kusema hivi. CRA ambayo imeleta formula hii ambayo ilikuja kwa Senate na leo hii Senate wakajadili ikakuja hapa, imeongea mambo sana ya kilimo. Mheshimiwa Spika, hii kipengele ama hizi takwimu za mambo ya kilimo, Mheshimiwa Spika, yanasukuma nje sana county zile ama magatuzi yale ambayo hayajabobea sana kwa mambo ya kilimo. Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi nataka kusema tu kuna magatuzi ambayo vile wenzangu wamesema yale ambayo yanategemea sana uvuvi wa samaki. Mheshimiwa Spika, lakini tena kuna yale magatuzi kama langu ambalo natoka Taita Taveta, sisi hata kilimo hatuwezi fanya kwa sababu ya shida tulionazo dhidi ya wananchi na mbuga za na wanyama wa pori. Mheshimiwa Spika, sasa wakati wameweka takwimu za kuwa ni mambo ya kilimo, Mheshimiwa Spika, sisi wengine ambao hatuwezi fanya kilimo kwa sababu ya shida hizo za wanyama wa pori inatudhulumu. Mheshimiwa Spika, pili, sisi ambao tena tunakaa pale ambapo mambo ya maji hayajatajwa katika formula hii. Mheshimiwa Spika, sababu ya kutokuwa na maji ndio sababu kuu inafanya wengine wetu ama kaunti nyingi zile ambazo zinaitwa kwa kizungu asal zinakosa kufanya kilimo, zinakosa kufanya hata maendeleo mengine, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hivyo mimi ninasema kwamba Seneti na Commissioner CRA ingekuwa imetilia mkazo sana mambo ya maji kuliko hata hii mambo ya kusema mambo ya kilimo, Mheshimiwa Spika. La mwisho, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni mambo ya afya. Sisi wengine wetu tunajua kwamba kuna zahanati na kuna zahanati nyingi za afya, Mheshimiwa Spika, ambazo zimebobea sana katika counties nyingi. Lakini kuna counties, Mheshimiwa Spika, na bunge hili nataka niseme kwamba mahali Mheshimiwa Naomi Shabana anatoka, wananchi wengi hawaendi mahospitali zetu kwa sababu hazina vifaa, hazina madawa, hazina miundo msingi muhimu ya kusaidia watu wetu. Wanabidi wavuke waende nchi jirani. Sasa wakisema idadi ya watu wanaotembelea zahanati, Mheshimiwa Spika, wale watu wetu wengi ambao wanatoka nchini kwenda nchi ya jirani hawajachukuliwa maanani hapa, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hivyo, Mheshimiwa Spika, tunaona tunapoteza wakati wanachukua idadi ya watu wanaotembelea zahanati na mahospitali pale kule nyanjani. Watu wetu wengi hawaendi zile hospitali zetu, Mheshimiwa Spika. Na kwa hivyo, Mheshimiwa Spika, formula hii iliyotumika inadhalilisha sana maeneo yale ambayo yamebaki nyuma miaka nenda miaka rudi. Mheshimiwa Spika, hata kama tunaunga mkono, ni vizuri iende katika kumbukumbu za bunge kwamba CRA na ikishirikiana na bunge la Seneti ni muhimu sana wachanganue masuala haya. Takwimu walizotumia, Mheshimiwa Spika, nyingi hizo si takwimu ambazo zinaweza hata zina uhakika, Mheshimiwa Spika. Mfano tu, Mheshimiwa Spika, wakati CRA ilileta ile formula ama ile ya tatu ya mambo ya marginalization, Mheshimiwa Spika, walitumia takwimu ambazo mimi nilizipinga, na tukaketi na commissioners wa CRA, na kweli wakaona kwamba takwimu walizotumia si nzuri ama hazikuwa za sawa. Waliweka maeneo mengine kuwa yamebobea na hali ilibidi watembelee na wakadhibitisha kwamba hawakutumia takwimu za sawa. Kwa hivyo, Mheshimiwa Spika, naunga mkono, lakini nikisema kwamba ni vizuri tuchunguze kwa undani hizi takwimu zinazotumiwa, manake tukiendelea hivi, Mheshimiwa Spika, nchi yetu itabaki kuwa kwingine kutaendelea, kwingine kutabaki nyuma, Mheshimiwa Spika. Mheshimiwa Spika, najua saa zimeisha, lakini kuna pesa nyingi zinabaki katika serikali kuu. Pesa nyingi. Ni vyema kama bunge la kitaifa tunapojadili bajeti tena katika supplementary budget zinapokuja hapa ndani, Mheshimiwa Spika, iletwe hesabu ya kuwa ile pesa inayobaki katika serikali ya kitaifa inatumiwa namna gani. Manake miradi mingi inaenda maeneo fulani na maeneo mengi yanabaki kuwa maskini, Mheshimiwa Spika. Naunga mkono, asante.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to speak to this crucial debate. And on the onset, Mr. Speaker, let me say that I come from Dalagwa, where we had the visit of the team led by Wamunyinyi. And in the words of Wafula Wamunyinyi, the member of parliament, the chairman of CDF, he actually said that he is amazed or he's surprised that Dalagwa is within Mount Kenya, where people have continued to think that there is development and it's an area that requires development. So even as we continued making this contribution, and Mr. Speaker, we've been elected to come to Parliament to represent our areas. So it's not a climb to say how your area requires development, how behind you are. It is something that we must allow to be part of our debates on a regular basis. And I want to say that, Mr. Speaker, because I know the members of Parliament from Northeastern are very eloquent, and I admire them, the way they have kept guarding.
Order on Abokioni.
Yes.
It is 1 p.m. That is not to say you have utilized all your minutes.
Yes.
When this business comes up again this afternoon, you shall have the remainder of the 4 minutes. Honorable members, we still have, this item had 2 hours, 30 minutes. So we still have a remainder of 30 minutes this afternoon for it to be concluded. Honorable members, the time being 1 p.m., this House stands adjourned until Thursday, 24th September 2020 at 2:30 p.m.